Hi all, so I believe you guys are doing alright during these troubled times, and today I'm going to talk about note-taking methods, which is actually an important skill when you start your academic journey, right? So maybe in school you are usually given notes by your teachers, but when it comes to a university setting, we rather expect you to come up with your own notes, and not really to depend on any notes provided by lecturers, right? Okay, so I'm pretty sure that you have been taking notes basically all your life, but did you know that there are specific methods, specific scientific methods of taking down notes? Maybe you know, maybe you don't, right? Anyway, let's figure out, right? So before we begin, I'm referring to the lesson on note-taking methods in your second module, and I'm basically looking at 5 methods of note-taking, namely the sentence method, Cornell method, outlining method, mapping, and charting method, right? So these are the 5 methods I'm looking at. In addition to those 5, I'm also going to discuss the 3-column method, one of my favorites when it comes to note-taking, right? Okay, so basically, like, why do people take notes? What do you think? Usually, like when you listen to a lecture or even when you are studying on your own, you do take notes in order to make that more of a an interactive experience, right? If you just listen to a lecture without really interacting in terms of taking down notes or asking questions, things like that, you're just listening, and it's proven that everything we hear will not be in our memory for a long time. However, if we take down notes at a lecture, it helps us to revise and it helps us to remember certain things as well. Okay, right? So and this is the same when it comes to studying at home, especially if you are referring to a textbook or a research paper or some other kind of a document, right? And you might read it. At the end of the day, you might not really remember things, right? One method is that people are very fond of using a highlighter and highlighting all the important parts. But if you are a person like me, what happens in the end is that you have highlighted 3/4 of the page, and then the whole point of highlighting is lost, right? So rather than highlighting, I encourage people to take what I call interactive notes, right? So taking interactive notes is also a concept discussed by other researchers as well. What really works for me is to make the process of taking down notes interactive, right? So I will be questioning the material that is there. If I get further ideas for research, or if I think that I need to refer some other documents and find more about a particular concept or a theory, then I would include that in my note as well, right? We'll talk about these things in detail as we discuss the 5+1 note-taking methods. Okay, right? So let's start with the sentence method, right? So sentence method is most commonly used. Okay, let's imagine that you are listening to a lecture. You are listening to this lecture, and while listening to it, you write down what sounds important to you as sentences, right? But the thing you're going to like the most is that when you are following the sentence method, you don't bother about grammar, spelling, or any other language issues, right? So you are just getting the main idea and writing it as a sentence. And this could be a fragmented sentence, a sentence that doesn't really have a particular subject. Also, it can be just the main idea written as a partial sentence, right? So you can use the sentence method. That's very common, and most commonly it is used when you are looking at when you are listening to a lecture, right? Okay, and then right, and then we can look at the Cornell note-taking method, and here I'm going to show you something I have prepared earlier. Okay, a small technical difficulty there. So here is the Cornell method of note taking, right? So in this case we have divided the page into two parts, a smaller section on the left and a larger section on the right. This is basically like one of your notebooks, isn't it, right? So this left side is for cues, basically words that trigger your memory, or certain keywords you hear in the lecture or find in the textbook, right? And the larger space is dedicated to notes, which can contain explanations, examples, definitions of terms, or like detailed descriptions of what comes under these cues. So these cues could be theories, terms, keywords, main points, whatever, like something that triggers your memory. Okay, right. So Cornell method is important both when you are listening to a lecture and even when you are preparing your own short notes or longer notes for study purposes, right? Okay, so and if you have any questions, you can write the questions also in this column and later on go back and find the answers to those. Okay, so this also facilitates revision. Imagine that you take your notes like this during the lecture, and when you go back and study, this becomes a sort of a guidance for revision purposes as well, right? And then the next one is the outlining method. I have already prepared this draft earlier. So outlining method is kind of similar to the numbers and the numbers and ordering systems you find in Word documents as well, right? So here, whatever the main point given in the lecture or the textbook, you put it right next to the margin, right? So you have your main point 1, and if there are any supporting or secondary details related to that, you can indent it and give those information. And then if there are further major subgroups that come under this particular point, you can further indent them and write whatever those subgroups could be. And if there are supporting secondary details for those, then you further indent and start writing those. Okay, right. Imagine that you have a definition. If there is a definition, it comes right next to the margin once again, right? So if it is a definition, it's important and it has to be clear. So you give your definitions here, right? So if the lecture or the text contains a list of items, you can dedicate particular, a special space for those listed items. So listed item 1, listed item 2. If there are examples, you indent it and then you give the examples right under that particular point. Okay, right. So this is all about one particular point. Okay, if you are if your lecturer moves to another main point, then what you can do is to leave a gap of 2 to 3 lines to indicate that this is a starting point of a separate segment, right? So you will write main point 2 or whatever, you mention the main point and then you go on, right? So like that you can have the outlining method to prepare more organized content, right? So if you are a person with a logical mind who enjoys having everything in a particular order, outlining method is just the method for you. And next, I'm planning to go to my personal favorite. Alright, so my favorite method of note taking is mapping method, right? So this is this appeals to your visual senses as well, and we all know that we tend to remember more information when they are given in graphical forms, right? So if I have to prepare my note on COVID-19, a particularly terrifying and a sort of a famous, or should I say notorious topic these days, I would be going about this task like this, right? So when I say COVID-19, I might find information about its history. Okay, so I have history and whatever the information that comes under it. Okay, and I might get information about the nature of the virus, the nature of the coronavirus, like how does it look like, pardon my drawing skills, how does it look like, and what constitutes its physical formation, etc. Or I might also want to know about its like spreading. How does it spread? What are the methods? What are the ways? And then I might find information about prevention methods. And so if there are prevention methods, okay, what are those? Okay, right. And so and I might have information about remedies. Are there remedies? If so, what are they and what is the current status? And I might also find statistics about the spread, about the number of patients, about the number of deaths, things like that. So basically I'm preparing a diagram, a map containing my map which turns out to be my note actually, right? So this is very visual, and if you enjoy a little bit of drawing while you're preparing notes like me, this could be your choice. Okay, right. So that's about mind mapping. Right, so after mapping method we move on to charting method. Okay, so there we talk about this is very simple. You prepare a chart like this or in any particular formation, and you categorize your information and fill these columns, right? So here you can talk, if it is like about environmental pollution, you can discuss types of environmental pollution, and then what the consequences, and how it affects people and whatnot, right? So if you want your information to be in clear cut categories, you can go for charting method as well. Okay, right. So that brings us to the sixth one, the additional note taking method I'm going to talk to you today. Right, so that's called the 3-column method. Basically it's like a table with 3 columns, first column, second column, and the third. And in the first column, what you include would be headings and main points. So like whatever the heading, you put it in the first column, and the main points also you can put there, like one below the other. Okay, and then in column 2 you can give examples or details that are relevant to whatever the main point you had mentioned in the previous column. And when it comes to the third column, you should give your personal responses. You might have questions, you might have observations, you might agree with a particular theory or a concept, you might disagree. Okay, so this third column really helps you to interact with the note you are making, or the text you are reading, or the lecture you are listening to, right? So like as a scholar, like this personal responses, like the ability to critique what you read, what you listen to, what you hear, that is a special ability, and this form allows you to be more interactive and give your personal opinions as well, right? Okay, so this is really important to know, right? Okay, so in today's lecture we discussed basically 6 note-taking methods. We started off with the sentence method, and then moved on to Cornell method and outlining methods, and then we looked at mapping and charting methods of note-taking, and the additional one, which is not in your module but it's there in my handout, so refer to that. That is the 3-column note-taking method, which is one of the most popular note-taking methods these days, right? Okay, so basically this lesson was about how to make your own notes. And in doing so, people usually say, like, how do you take notes? When I ask them how do you take notes, they say point form, or there's no particular way. People don't really think of it as a practice, they just do it. But it's always good to be aware of these different types, and you study different materials. Maybe you would like to use the sentence method, or say the Cornell method when you are listening to a lecture and taking down notes. But when you're preparing your exam notes or like short notes, you might opt for a more graphic depiction of the content you study. Maybe the mapping method, when you are reading texts and try to broaden your knowledge on a particular subject, you might opt to have the 3-column method, right? So when you have these learning tools, it makes the task of learning much more easier, which is why we teach you these right now. Okay, right. So if you have more questions, please let me know. I will give you the link for the additional lesson materials and exercises in the description box below, or I will mail it to you. Okay, right. So if you have any questions, do let me know. And there are a couple of exercises in the handout. You are supposed to complete them and compile those in a separate folder with other exercises we have done earlier, right? Okay, so then stay safe and take care. Bye.